What's up, college football fans? Noe Valenta here once again with the Mean Green Show. Today, joined by Eric Henry, we're going to talk about FAU's latest addition in the quarterback room in Casey Thompson, transfer out of Nebraska. But before we get into all that, guys, you already know the drill. If you're a fan of college football or G5 football, consider hitting that like and subscribe button because that's all that we talk about. Okay, Eric. Well, hey, I appreciate you jumping on with me, kind of talking about this, the latest portal moves for the FAU QB and Casey Thompson. And, just initially, what are your initial thoughts on this edition? And do you think it's pretty much, a given that he's going to be the starter for the 2023 season?
First off, I appreciate you having me on, man. It's been a while, man. I feel like I lost my bro, man. I used to be on all the time, and now the offseason's hit. It's been a while. So I appreciate you, banging my line and him about a little FAU football, of course, making the move to the American. They're looking under Tom Herman to bounce back after the Willie Taggart era there, where things kind of ended in a very disappointing fashion. Big part of that's been the quarterback carousel, right? They had N'Kosi Perry past few years, very much kind of up and down situation, really since I think the last year of Chris Robinson was the last time they probably had outstanding play at the quarterback position. And as you talked about, they added Casey Thompson, former Texas, former Nebraska starter as well. It's going to be interesting, because they added a quarterback, a local kid out of Miami Carroll City High School, Daniel Richardson. Well, I guess local subjective, right? From Miami to Palm Beach is about an hour, but he's a South Florida native, right? So you get the idea. And he was really kind of projected, at least, entering spring in my mind, to really be the starter. Yes, Michael Johnson Jr. was there. The former four-star recruit transferred in from Penn State a few years back when his father, Michael Johnson Sr., was the offensive coordinator under Willie Taggart. But for all intents and purposes, it did seem as if it was going to be a two-man race between Daniel Richardson and Michael Johnson Jr. And now you insert Casey Thompson to the mix, you have to assume that he's going to be the starter. And it's not just a byproduct of the fact that he came from, quote-unquote, a bigger program, right? Having played at two Power 5 schools. Just look at the track record, right? Tom Herman, while yes, his staff brought in Daniel Richardson, Casey Thompson is someone who has ties back to Tom Herman's time at Texas, right? And that, in my mind, is where I really think you have to draw the link there. Coaches don't bring in players that they have those types of ties with and just bring them there to sit. More times than not, they're going to get every opportunity to be the starter. You have to believe that's the case here.
Right. So Daniel Richardson, he came in, he was one of Herman's guys, right? Like, as far as Herman was hired prior to him transferring.
Yes,
okay.
Yes, no. Willie Taggart was fired 12 hours after the season ended. So yes, Dan Richardson is one of Tom Herman's quote unquote guys. Yes.
Right. Man. So just kind of, in today's, transfer portal world that we live in for college football, do you feel like this is chess and not checkers by Tom Herman's standpoint of like bringing Casey Thompson in after, when it's pretty much too late for Daniel Richardson or any other of the QBs to hit the portal? And also, if you could kind of speak to, how do you feel like they approach that in that position, you being the head coach and going to get another QB after spring, kind of portraying the, guys, we just don't feel comfortable or whatever, because this is not a depth piece. He only has one year left, Casey Thompson, that is. So obviously he's coming here with probably being told that you're going to have every opportunity to take the starting spot. But if you can speak to those 2 points at all.
Yeah. Listen, and it's tricky, right? Because here's the thing. If we had this discussion in the NFL, we're talking about pro football, we'd say, all right, well, that's just the way it is, right? Free agency, we're always looking to add, always looking to improve our team. But I think we kind of view it through the prism of college football and say, all right, well, is that, unethical or unfair that, he brings in guys after guys don't have the opportunity to transfer and whatnot. So I really hope that players in the transfer portal era, kind of a tongue twister, are going into it with their eyes wide open and saying, hey, yes, I may have been brought here in, spring, as for in the case of Daniel Richardson, he got there in January. But the portal's always moving. They're always moving pieces. They're always players in and out. This is free agency. I said this 3, 4, 5 years ago when the portal really kind of picked up. And I didn't mean it. I think a lot of people recoiled because they thought of free agency. They thought about, checks and money and whatnot. And, here we are with NIL, right? So yes, that stuff kind of is a factor. I'm just saying it's free agency from the extent of there's going to be fluid movement. You have to look at your roster. Tom Herman, quite frankly, would be doing a disservice to FAU if he was not trying to approach his roster like an NFL GM. what pieces are out there after, the season ends, what pieces are out there after the first portal window and then the second portal window, right? So is it necessarily fair or unfair? I don't know. I mean, again, I hope all these players who are entering the transfer portal are going into this eyes wide open, understanding that, look, this is just the same as recruiting. You have a former, 3-star, 4-star recruit, right, who signs at a certain position, and guess what? Next year, if there's let's use Texas as an example, right? Quinn Ewers. Now, for all intents and purposes, it looks like he's going to be the starter at Texas, but they signed the nation's #1 recruit and quarterback in Arch Manning, right? So you always got to assume that someone is going to come in at your position. So in my mind, while it's a tough break, quote unquote, for Daniel Richardson, there's still fall. You could almost flip it and say he has the benefit of time, that he's been there in the spring, and if he can beat out Casey Thompson, then he'll be the starter. But yeah, in this transfer portal era, I just think it is what it is in terms of teams and coaches. And I hope for my sake, for the players' sake, they're going into it understanding that, hey, this thing is always fluid.
Last question. Do you think Casey Thompson, if he can play to what maybe we project that he might be able to play, that he can take this team and get them 1 or maybe 2 more wins than any other QB in the room?
That's tough, because FAU as a program, you can make the argument. I think it'd be very fair to say they underachieved the past 2 years under Willie Taggart, right? I mean, they've had Evan Anderson. Evan Anderson's one of the top defensive tackles amongst the G5 ranks. He's a guy who could have easily gone to the P5, right? They have pieces there at FAU, right? The big thing in my mind is the player development and the consistency of game to game. And that's where you can make the argument, in my mind, why Willie Taggart's no longer at FAU. It wasn't necessarily that they were getting smoked by teams. It was that they were losing games that you thought, in theory, they should win or at least be competitive, and they could never build on success. They were just around that 500 mark for the past few years, because one game they looked like gangbusters, and next game they looked like a team that was all out of sorts. So to kind of answer your question in specificity, can Tom Herman get that talent to rise to the occasion? We'll see. It wouldn't shock me in my mind. And granted, this is a new conference going to the American, so it's not the old Conference USA, but it wouldn't shock me if Tom Herman's able to get this team similar to how Lane Kiffin in year 1 had them competing for a conference title. Of course, Lane Kiffin won a conference title his first year and his final year at FAU. It wouldn't shock me to see Tom Herman be able to do that. Is Casey Thompson necessarily the driving force behind that? That to me is subjective. I think it's the bigger question is, can Tom Herman get the most parts, the sum of all parts of that team to rise to the occasion? That will be the defining factor in my mind as to whether or not they have an additional win or 2.
Awesome. Well, once again, Eric, I appreciate it, and have fun with the rest of your summer. Enjoy some time off, and I'm sure we'll talk soon.
Absolutely, brother. Anytime.